Hello and welcome to the 23rd episode of Timely Topics. I'm your host, Rory McGloin, and today I'm sitting down with Taneisha Duggan, Hartford's Director of the Office of Arts, Culture, and Entertainment. Taneisha is a true cultural architect dedicated to leveraging performance to build community and inspire change. With deep roots in Hartford's vibrant art scene, Taneisha is passionate about celebrating and advocating for the city's unique spirit and excellence. She describes herself as a bridge between art, community, and legacy, working to ensure Hartford's creative voice is both heard and honored. Join us as we explore her inspiring journey, her vision for the city, and how she's shaping a legacy of cultural strength and unity. All right, a big welcome to all of our listeners. I'm very excited about this. I'm in studio today sitting down to interview Taneisha Duggan, who is the Director of the Office of Arts, Culture, and Entertainment for the City of Hartford. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate you saying Duggan as hard as it is, I know.
We know. We've worked on this. Taneisha and I got a chance to hang out and meet this summer, and we talked a little bit about all sorts of amazing things. This is going to be an amazing conversation. Yeah. We have so many topics to get to, right?
Of course.
Yeah, we go way back, okay? We have lots of things in common, and one of the things that I thought was really cool is that you have been quoted and described as being a bridge between art, community, and legacy. My father was a bridge builder. I said, I really like that, so I want to start there. In fact, actually set some steel right here in Constitution Plaza. So
shout out to Dad.
Let's do. Yeah, he's actually going to turn 95 in 2 weeks. So that'd be pretty cool. So God bless him. So happy birthday,
God bless.
Dad.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Yeah. So let's do this, right? A bridge between art, community, and legacy for the city of Hartford. You've got this relatively newly appointed role. Tell us and the listeners, like, what is this, right? What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think I'm figuring it out every day, both in this office, but just life in general. I truly believe that arts and culture are the center of who we are. You know, I'm a polymath, and I think like that's the sort of dream of everybody, is that everyone sort of has this intersectional understanding of life, a curiosity about what happened before us and what will happen in the future. And I think creative thinking, which I think is the epicenter of arts and culture, is what we do. And then the storytelling, right? That bridge of legacy is about, again, like I said, what happened before and who's going to carry it forward in the future. I
love that. Let's talk about something for a second, because we were chatting about this. We're saying Hartford is really trying to brand itself right now as being a place for innovation, right? And a place for entrepreneurship, right? A place for businesses. And yet I know for myself that if I truly want to be creative and innovative, I have to step outside. I have to get away from the day-to-day. I have to get away from the mundane, from the routine. My creativity is going to be fueled from the consumption of culture, in particular for me, but also art. Can you try and dive in a little bit in terms of like how you've been able to position this role for our business leaders in the community to help them understand, look, I genuinely think that if we want to be innovative, we've got to support arts and culture. And that's not always something that like just comes off the top of mind.
Yeah, it's true. I think one of the things I've discovered is that Hartford loves to call itself the place between New York and Boston. Yeah. And I always find that funny. And I say back to people, you never say I'm the child between my two parents. You go, I'm me, right? Yeah, and so really understanding who Hartford is key to this true ability to innovate. I have come to this thesis that we're in a moment where there's a cap on ideas. And so the idea that you can come to Hartford and have the biggest idea you can imagine, and then you can make that manifest, is something that we're working through. And so I think for that sort of collaboration between the business community and the creative culture is really understanding that imagination is our currency. American innovation, the American dream, that used to be like the thing, not just a marketing tagline, but something that we really believed in. And I think right now, if we're all being honest with ourselves, that reality and the engine and the action of innovation is something that we talk about, but that we don't do. And it requires, again, I'll use my polymath, it requires minds of diverse backgrounds to come together and think in a non-binary, we say outside of the box, but in a non-binary way. And for me, a lot of this, I think between the time that we came up and were educated till now, there's this idea that if you have a creative mind, you can't be valuable from a capitalist perspective, but we know that's not true because some of the most wealthy human beings are the ones who think the most innovatively, the most creatively. So what does it mean for us to sort of interact with each other in a binary way, asking for us to sort of think inhibitedly? How can we as a creative sector sort of move in the circles of our business class so that we're pushing each other to be truly innovative?
You know what I think about as you're saying that, it's just like we talk a lot about how do we create business? How do we create opportunity? How do we create scale? The word's right there.
Exactly.
And yet typically what I don't hear following that is we should start by investing in creativity.
Right. What are the conditions needed for creativity?
Yes. And that's kind of one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about and kind of shed light on is like when you think about creating an ecosystem for business and culture here in our city, which I think a lot of folks can relate to around the world, right, that are trying to put this on, what do you think is the ideal set of ingredients? Like what's that role that you actually, when we think about art, right, which feels so abstract when you think about whether it's actual like art that you see in a museum or the music that we hear on the street corner or the murals that are on the side of our buildings. Have you been able to kind of like study or think about it in a very direct way that like the presence or absence of art actually does have, you know, a direct impact on the scale of these innovative ideas or the presence of these innovative ideas?
Absolutely. Art, I won't say the purpose of art or rather the function of art or the why humans go to art is to unpack truth, is to understand something that is true about us all. And I think in a context in which truth is a fuzzy thing, the idea that you're trying to pursue that through your action becomes really difficult, right? Yeah. And so how do we sort of, to me, the condition of creativity requires us to at least admit that there is a truth we're all trying to get towards, right? And that there are lots of, like science. You sort of try some stuff out and like, it doesn't work, we iterate. It doesn't work, we innovate. It doesn't work, we iterate, right? But we're always trying to go towards something that is unabashedly true. And I think the destruction and the dismantling of just the word, right, makes it really hard for folks to be creative. It makes it really hard for folks to be outside.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out. Actually, one of our very first guests on the show, Andre Rochester, right, a curator of great art here. And
great artist himself.
Yeah, and playing a great role in the city. And I learned so much. Andre started that interview by saying something. I want you to talk a little bit about this. He said, from his viewpoint, he said, art is not what about the artist created, but about the perception of what others see in it. As you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, if we do not have art to perceive, then we have stunted the ability to have creativity in ourselves because there is no perception of something, right? And so one of my questions kind of in your role, what do you feel like you want to either create more of or add a presence of that you think will have an impact that would actually benefit the people of Hartford or benefit the surrounding areas? Like what type of art, what type of culture is it that you'd like to foresee that'll allow me to go out and reflect about myself and thereby take it back to wherever I go and make my life better? Yeah,
I mean, I think the first thing is creating the condition where you want to reflect about yourself.
Okay.
Right? I'm not a form soldier, right? I think they're all useful, and I think you as a human determine the thing that moves you. My practice is theater, right? My practice is deeply collaborative and about performance. But a theater practice is so much about process, right? Yes, what you see is the end result, but you spend many months, sometimes years, sometimes decades on the way towards that, essential piece. So there's not a particular kind of art form or culture that I'm interested in. I'm actually interested in embedding creativity into the way we live. That is what I think my role is. I think that we have shunted creativity and what we call arts and culture into an accessory, an earring we decide to put on. And I can see that thinking made manifest in the way that we connect with each other, the way that we build things, the businesses and the jobs, and the way in which we just look at how we live, right? Like our relationship to labor and productivity and work doesn't necessarily make room for folks to be, let alone be creative. So that's, my role in the way that I see creative capital is one in which it's about creating conditions for humans to be as full as they need to be.
You said the word accessory, but at the same time, I was actually thinking about accessibility. And I'm curious from your vantage point, when I think about art in Hartford, immediately I go to kind of the formal spaces, right? And some of the traditional spaces. I've had the great fortune of also exploring some of the more kind of off the beaten path spaces. But I just wonder, do you feel like art in whatever form we want to talk about it, and we're going to come back to the performance thing in a second. Do you feel like art is at a place where it feels accessible right now to people in Hartford? And I mean that from almost both directions. Do we as patrons, as consumers of art, do we feel like there's enough or there's value in it to go seek it? And on the other hand, are the spaces and the places and the artists, are they doing their part to make it accessible? What do you think about that balance right now and where we're at, or maybe where you'd like to see us go?
Yeah, I mean, I think we say the word art with a capital A, and that in and of itself makes it seem inaccessible. But I have to remember, again, to the legacy piece, Hartford has been an art city since its inception. Okay. We have monuments and statues, which is basically public art dating back to 1865, right? And that's the most accessible art, right? And so we follow that line from the monuments built to tell the story of who we believe should remain to the murals that are on the walls now, right? Those are the most accessible pieces of visual art that we have, right? And then I think about our access to the screens, and I don't think we recognize the work of folks like you who are putting content out there, and we call it content, but it's art, it's communication, it's culture, and that is the most accessible. And so for me, I think it's about training the folks who are telling our story, even in the digital space, to see it as lowercase a art, which is that it is beautiful and it is necessary and it is communication on the most basic level. These, we're going to always need access to the technology to be able to actually keep the things that have happened now. And that's a concern I have. I always say if the aliens come by, what if they can't actually, get to the technology of our computers? How will they know we were here? How will they know that this time happened? And so I'm actually very curious about the analog things. I'm out here in my side life, making records with some of the greatest artists on the planet right now, like vinyl records, because all you need is a pencil and the ability to spin that thing and you can hear sound. So I'm curious about tangible things. I'm curious about books, about how we're writing things down, etching things into concrete, because the way we tell the story of humanity is best, I think, depicted in those scratchings on the cave walls. Yeah,
it's really interesting because I wanted to talk a little bit about culture and the performance of culture, right? Like, how do you perform your culture? Like, culture is not something
we're in the midst of the greatest performance of culture I think humanity has ever seen.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because we're all performers, right? And I think those of us that believe that, right, the intentionality of our communications, because you're leaving little pieces behind every single day. You're leaving your scratchings on the wall, whether you know it or not. And we're in this performance of culture. When you think about your role here in the city, just for a moment, which I think so many people can relate to in their businesses and their organizations and their startups, right? Like, what do you feel right now is the trend that you're maybe most excited about? You mentioned digital. I didn't expect you to go there, right? Because I know you to kind of prefer that tangible piece, that shared space. But when you think about the thing you're most excited about, that when you look at us as performers, that you're sitting back from your director's seat and saying, this is good, more, right? More. Is there a thing that stands out that you feel inspired by or you feel good about? Because I think there's a lot of things that sometimes people come in and they say, this isn't great and that's not great and we're eroding this and we're eroding that. It's like, okay, right, but let's take a positive spin on it. What are we doing good?
Yeah, what do we do?
Yeah.
I'm really excited by the gatherings that are being created around the city, to the point of the performance of life and the performance. There's something about the embodied story that gets passed along, and that happens person to person, body to body over time. What memories do you have that you're going to tell somebody else about? Those are as essential to the human story as whatever concrete piece of art remains. And so things like Tia's roommate, the coffee shops that have been a part of our culture for almost 20 years, the sort of resurgence of those institutions that used to feel very cold and inaccessible, them opening themselves up to community events, free access, whether you're just a Hartford resident or it's a special event that they're opening themselves up to. I'm really excited by the embodied practice of culture that's happening right now, which trickles down to even restaurants. I love, I think sometimes the Foundry can feel inaccessible, but I think it's a beautiful example of how aesthetic and food and smell and sort of usage of all five senses can really enlighten a new piece of yourself, and raising the bar on what a culinary experience can be. Like that stuff truly excites me. And I'm excited to see, our neighborhoods really sort of get into who they are. I was having a conversation the other day and it was like, let's not talk about it as neighborhood identity, because the word identity has started to feel, very close.
Yeah, close, yeah.
But, and I think brand feels good to some people and not great to others. But I think it's like, who are we and what are we doing and how do we do it? That culture piece that makes us so American. You and I have talked about this. Yeah. I call you my cousin because we both come from an Irish background, right? Our ancestors are Irish. Yeah. And that used to be the thing that connected Americans, is that we would go like, well, what makes you up, right? And I'd go a little Jamaican, a little slave descended, American Black, a little Irish, a little English. And you'd be like, oh my God, English, tell me more about that part. That's the piece that I connect to. And so these spaces that are sort of reminding us of the specificity of who we are while not being exclusive in that piece feels so much like the America I think we all,
dream of
that we are. I mean, this big, gigantic piece of land holds every person from around the globe. That's remarkable.
Yeah.
How do we hold on to that? And I'm seeing lots of light around the events and the activities that are happening in the culture sector here.
I love this topic because in the midst of our cultural performance of celebrating identity and individual identity, there's a second piece that's celebrating others' identity and finding the commonalities. And this is where culture becomes really interesting, because I think culture in and of itself, by itself, is not all that interesting. It's the juxtaposition of, well, we do this, what do you do? And then finding commonalities and finding the differences and celebrating both. Something that's standing out to me, and I'm just going to do kind of an observation almost as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about, okay, what's this task? What's this role? What are you going to achieve? How do you measure success? I'm sitting and thinking, geez, if we could find a way to help others to celebrate their contributions, their scratches on the wall, their contributions as being artistic, that'd be a mindset shift. And maybe then that leads us to be more intentional and thereby more supportive of creativity. So I have a kind of a challenging question for you in a way. And I think this is a question that faces many artists. So on the one hand, I hear you speaking about art as being so many things that we can contribute to that are not commissioned, like, I think about our organizations that we're a part of and that we contribute, and there's no cost to them, we just do it. But then there's the other side of art, right? There's the business side of art. And there is the side that we have to, those who are professionals, and however we want to label that, they deserve the right to have an opportunity to be supported, to be able to put their work out in a way that can be capitalized on, that allows them to go and create, because they are, in my opinion, they're responsible for bestowing it to the next generation, to teach, to guide, to mentor, to inspire. How do we, from a very city kind of standpoint, right? How do you find a way to create balance where we're providing fundamental support for professional artists to go do their thing, and then yet recognizing that the best situation is that it is self-sustainable, right? That it kind of celebrates and sustains itself, because we know that if the costs reach a certain point, it's not accessible. But at the same time, if we don't support it, then where does it come from? You talk a little bit when you think about your role or the responsibility that we all have to support art, both that which is commissioned or that which is capitalized, but also that which is just open and free. How do you find a good balance to create an artistic culture that thrives?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give you a very unsatisfying answer.
Perfect.
Which is that in the year 2025 of our Lord, your students who are in business school are not going to come out and be able to sustain themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think 20 years ago, we could have had a conversation about, well, the specificity around the creative culture and how do they sustain themselves. But we're in a moment where no one can sustain themselves. There is no guarantee for, and I think this is why the performance of culture looks like it does right now.
I agree.
Is that not even the most privileged of us can come out doing all of the right things and have the things that we thought were guaranteed. And so, I would love to engage in the conversation around artists in particular, but the conversation has now expanded beyond artists. There's no value on being, period. We live in a country in particular. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to consecrate the whole world under this, but we live in a country that doesn't value being, that you can't just be, right? That you have to do. Mm-hmm. And, I've heard this in many conferences, artistic conferences and otherwise. We're not called human doings. We're called human beings. So what is it if we've chosen capitalism as our modality to live in society, to remove the fact that you just exist from the fact that you deserve the basic things to exist as a species? I used to chuckle when we were in the midst of COVID, and it'd be like, that was actually the best time of my life, right? Because we could just be animals on this planet. And I happen to be privileged enough to have a home, right? Privileged enough to be able to support eating, right? And so the basics things that an animal has to make sure they have to survive, I had. Which meant that as a human being, I could then do whatever this being was driven to do without any consideration of capitalization, productivity, right?
Interesting.
It was the first time I ever, had a garden. I still have that garden to this day. I was religious about eating with my children and having family dinners, right? We were religious because our pod was right? Old COVID dog, right? Was relatively large, or community. And we would, it was wine and dinner and like a day of just being together and watching football or whatever was playing in that season. It was truly a time for me of being. And I find it really interesting 5 years from that, how far away from being we're all trying to run.
Yeah, going back to the productivity.
Right? As opposed to recognizing, and I don't want to go too far down the road of capitalism, but I think we understand how fearful that time was for the people at the top, because all of a sudden it was like, oh shit, if they can exist without churning this wheel, what does it mean? The greatest ending to a show that I loved was to watch Daenerys Targaryen continue to push the wheel. And everyone was pissed and hurt, right? But it was artists saying,
this is
what do we do?
Like. Yeah, the reflection. That's a very interesting place to kind of, maybe almost leave us to pause the conversation there in a moment. We've often heard about this idea of like art being a reflection, right, of who we are, but it's up to us to see it, right? If we go back to the idea that I have to receive or perceive or understand, I'm going to make sense of it. You can put whatever you want in front of me. It's my interpretation of it. Potentially, like one of the things that is at the center of your cause, at the center of your mission, is to try to find some shared values maybe along the way. Absolutely. Not along my individual perception of the piece, but along our shared appreciation of the piece's presence. So, wow, fascinating. Okay, I'm going to bring us home. And one of the things that we do is, for all of our guests, we have some fun rapid fire questions here for season 2. So we're going to get to know Taneisha a little bit better. So I got 3 questions for you, Taneisha. The first question is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? And would you share it with us?
Best piece of advice. I'll give you the most memorable advice,
yes, of course.
Which was, I had the dean of Purchase, Israel Hicks, the incredible Israel Hicks, director, actor, told me I needed to go spend the summer at a factory. And I was like, huh? And what he was telling me is that I needed less of a soft life, that I had been so lucky my whole life to sort of be me, without any constrictions. And he was like, you've got to know what it feels like to be held down.
Yeah.
Because I had been held softly for so long. Right. So I think that has been the most meaningful advice, is to remind me to look for, I'm an idealist, right? But how do you make those ideals manifest? You've got to sort of be tied to the ground. And so, yeah.
That's cool. I love that story. Okay, second question. What is a book, and this should be fun for you, what's a book, a TV show, a movie, or a piece of art, I suppose, that you think offers some value, insights, or inspiration for our listeners that might be entrepreneurial or in organizational leadership spaces? So what might be something where you go, that piece that inspires me? I think you just gave us one, which was great right there a moment ago, but anything that stands out that you might say, go watch this, go read this, go look at this, go listen to this to find some inspiration from?
I would go with All My Sons.
Okay.
Arthur Miller. Yes, I may be wrong. Don't get me wrong if I messed up the playwright.
We will get
All My Sons is something that I think is prescient for this moment.
Okay. All right. Well,
shout out to Hartford Stage, who did a production of it maybe 1 or 2 seasons ago.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, big shout out to Hartford Stage. He's actually partners with us for Build Hartford too. Great partners down there. And then finally, a little bit of fun, a little bit of joy. The question is, Taneisha, what brings you joy?
Well, joy always. Hashtag joy always. I love to eat. I love cuddling with my children. I love spending time with folks out in the I say the field, but like just I love being, and I love thinking with folks like you, who make me imagine and then put into action those imaginings. That stuff brings me great joy.
Me too. Thank you so much for coming on the show and being a part of this great conversation. I hope it continues. Taneisha, always a pleasure.
Always.